All right, welcome everyone. Everyone's just joining us here this morning. Please let us know where you're joining from. I know we got a lot of people we're expecting. We're just going to get started in just a minute. We'll let everyone get caught up. I see our numbers are skyrocketing here. We do have the Q&A and chat section open today. So if you do want to let us know where you're joining from, we'd love to hear it. I know our panelists are coming from, I think, across the world. I don't think any two of us are in the same city right now, which is interesting. But we will be getting started in just a minute. Thank you so much for joining us from wherever you are coming from. Let me open up the chat to see where everyone says they're joining from today. Italy, right away. Right there, Chiro. They're coming for you, right from your home country. We're letting everyone just join in here. It'll be just a few minutes as everyone joins in. Amsterdam looks like Europe's alive and well. I guess over here in North America, it's still our morning. Maybe everyone's a little sleepy. Montreal, see that a fellow Canadian. Munich, yeah, Europe is alive. Toronto, it's the closest one yet. I'm in London, Ontario, Canada, joining today. Boston, UK. We got a little bit coming from North America. Looks like our numbers are leveling out here just a bit, so maybe we'll begin. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This is our Unity 2020 LTS webinar. My name is Ben McElmoyle, and I work as a developer advocate here at Unity. That means I get to work with creators and developers like yourselves to help bring you news about our latest and greatest features, like we're doing today. And then also I get to listen to you and bring feedback to the teams actually working on these features and let the community, the developers using Unity, help shape the future of the software itself. So today we're looking at some of the latest and greatest features from Unity 2020 LTS. But it's not just me up here. There's a few of us. Sorry, Chiro, I didn't put you on the slide. I didn't know you're going to be here. Sorry. But we have Bronson and Dan are both actually going to be presenting here in just a few minutes. As besides just us on-camera personalities, the presenters today, we also have a whole team of the research and development department. The devs that actually get to work on these new features are here to help answer your questions. And speaking of questions, we do have both, like I said, the chat, the regular chat in Zoom, and the Q&A section open. So if you do have technical questions you want to ask us, please refer to that Q&A section. That's what we'll be watching for those questions. If you just want to add comments or talk to the community members, go ahead and use chat. But again, please use Q&A if you have technical questions, and we'll try to answer them as quickly as we can. We are expecting quite a few attendees today. So if it takes a little bit of time for us to get to your questions, please be patient, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. So let's get into today's actual presentation by starting with talking about the long-term support versus the tech stream versions. So if you stay kind of up to date on Unity news, you probably noticed a few weeks ago we released both the Unity 2020 LTS, or the long-term support version, as well as the Unity 2021.1 tech stream version. This is pretty typical of how Unity works. And we're going to start off with a quick explanation about why choose one or the other and some of the differences between them. So today's webinar is all about the long-term support or LTS version, but it is important to understand the differences between the two of them. So let's actually start with the tech stream, the kind of the bleeding edge version of Unity that we have going. So this also just released just a few weeks ago. And the tech stream gives you access to all the latest and greatest in progress features. So bleeding edge kind of technology as it is. And you can actually use them, explore them, pressure test them in your projects. And then again, like I said earlier, actually help us shape the future of Unity. We get very excited adding these new features in. It's where gaming and where all these other tech industries are going, but we actually need users like yourself using this, giving us feedback and helping us shape it before it becomes the next version of the LTS in the next year. So we won't be diving too deep into the tech stream today. We actually have another webinar coming up on Thursday at the same time. There is another registration you will have to go through to get to that, and I'll throw it up here in the chat so you have that if you're interested. That link there on Thursday, we'll be talking about a lot of the new features in the tech stream release, but today we're going to be focusing more on the LTS or long-term support version. So let's talk about that. So Unity 2020 LTS is our latest LTS release. This version is really all about stability and matured features. So last year, obviously being 2020, was when this was being when we were working on features for this rather, it was our text stream. But because people like yourselves, the developers, actually use this, they help us test these things. They find bugs for us. We fix them. We optimize. We stabilize. Then we bundle that all up and put it into what we call the LTS, or the long-term support version. So if you've been using Unity 2020 in the past, we came out with the first version, 2020.1, and then .2, and then the .3 version is what we call LTS, or long-term support. So let's compare just a few features of these two and see kind of why you might use one versus the other. So the LTS is released once a year, like it just was, and we will be making small updates to it, but only to fix bugs and things like that. We won't be adding any new big features to it. The text stream, on the other hand, it gets two major updates a year. So we're currently on 2021.1. That usually comes out in Q1, the first quarter of the year. And then we'll be having another one released sometime around Q4 this year. So it'll be 2021.2. The LTS gets updates and supports for 2 years. So like I said, we're not adding anything new to it. We're not, adding new features or anything like that. But if bugs do pop up, anything like that, we will continue to maintain and support it for 2 years. So it just came out a few weeks ago. So if you started using it now for a project, then it's good to go for 2 years. It's stable, and hopefully you'll be happy with that for a solid while. The text stream, on the other hand, of course, we're fixing bugs if they do come up, optimizing, stabilizing, all that fun stuff. But we're also adding new features. As new technology comes out, it gets added to this version of Unity. And then you, the developers, actually use it. We get to test it that way, see how it all works, and then make those updates until the point it becomes stable enough to become the next year's LTS. So like I've already mentioned, we'll be adding no new features or API changes to the LTS version, but you do get that 2 years of bug fixing and maintenance support. Whereas the text stream, like I just mentioned, it gets those updates frequently for new features and things like that. Eventually, we bundle all those small updates into the next version, which would be 2021.2. And then again, we bundle all those up into what would be the next year's LTS version. So we have these two different versions here, LTS and text stream. And why might you choose one versus the other? Like I really just said, it comes down to stability. If you have a game that's about to go into production, or maybe it already is in production, chances are you really value stability. You don't want weird new bugs or weird new things popping up in your games. So we suggest using the LTS version. On the other hand, if you're just prototyping a game, or maybe you're just starting development and it's going to take a few years anyways, you can start with the text stream, get all the latest and greatest features, experiment with stuff as it comes out. And then if it does take, let's say, a year or two to get your game to production or to market, that version will eventually become the LTS. And now you have the benefit of having all the bleeding edge tech, and then it will become stable as things go on as well. So whatever version you use, they're both great choices, just different reasons you might choose either one. But enough about comparing. Let's get into the actual 2020 LTS. Now we're going to talk about a lot of features here today. I'm going to kind of bring up, it's like big walls of text that have a lot of the updates we've seen in Unity 2020 LTS. And I'm just going to quickly cover a few of them. And then my teammates here, Dan and Bronson, will go into depth in just a minute with a few of these features. So let's start with programmer tools and performance updates. For me, some of the really most exciting ones, I think, are around IO2 CPP. I was a Switch developer for a long time before I did this. I spent a lot of time waiting for things to compile. We've got a lot of updates that will really make that a lot quicker, which if you've been in that space before, you'll definitely appreciate that. So zero change rebuilds for IO2 CPP. Let's say you make a non-coding change, you change a material or a color or something like that. Instead of waiting for minutes for it to recompile again, it says, hey, you know what? There's no code changes. I don't need to do that. You can see those changes taking effect immediately. Excuse me. IO2 CPP build time improvements is also a really big one. In the past, the build was single threaded, and now it's actually multi-core, so it builds itself a lot faster. Over on the other column there, I know Dan's going to be up in a few minutes talking about a few of these features, like the C#8 support and safe mode as well. But we have general improvements really almost across the board, which is awesome to see. In the editor and team workflows, quality of life updates, I think these are often some of my favorite ones because they make my life easier. And don't we all want that? So some interesting ones here. I like setting an object as a default parent. So as you bring new objects into the scene, it'll automatically go and say, hey, bring them under this object. No more dragging and dropping, saving us a lot of time there. Dragging and dropping multiple prefabs in the scene is another one. Oftentimes I'll set up one kind of testing scene, set up all my prefabs. I need to bring them into a production scene or a scene I'm sharing with my team. And now I don't have to drag and drop a whole bunch of things. Save me a bunch of time, select them at once and bring them over as they go. A whole bunch of great improvements here that we'll also be looking at in just a few minutes. For our editor and team workflows, we got lots of updates around localization. One of the first jobs I ever did as a programmer back in the Flash development days was make a localization system. I remember what a nightmare it was programming it, adding Excel sheets, doing all kinds of translations with people. Obviously, localizations existed in a lot of Unity games, but now we have a native package that's available that you can start using and having locale or region-based text and culture-specific assets as well. And then at the same time, if you're a Unity package developer, we also have a bit of a localization package available for certain languages at this point, where you can actually go and make your packages support different locales as well. So lots of cool things coming in that space, as well as some others there. For artist tools and graphics, Bronson will be covering this in just a few minutes. Multi-mesh and pre-particle mesh LOD for VFX graphic is really cool. So if you're way out, your camera's far out from the distance and you have particle systems going and it's really high detailed, it's going to slow down performance. With a multi-mesh feature, we allow up to 4 meshes to actually be used, so you can make performance of these systems a lot more performant, I suppose. As well as that last one, there's a big one for me, frustum calling optimization. So if things are off screen, you can't see it, why render those particles? Again, big performance upgrades there in the VFX graph. For the media and entertainment industry, we're seeing this more and more, not just game developers using it, other industries as well. And we've got some pretty interesting things here. I think the first one is what I really saw that excited me. The Recorder API available. This lets you do some really cool things of either in editor or continuous integration systems. So let's say you want to make a trailer or a screenshot of your game, maybe for investors or potential clients, whatever it may be. And you cut a version of that video now, and you actually want an updated version as your artists bring new things into the project. You can actually now set that up so that as artists bring these in, it'll automatically record new videos for you, making capturing in-engine assets or in-engine projects, I should say, easier than ever, and automating that, which I personally love automation as a programmer. So lots of cool tools for the media and entertainment space as well. Over in UI, we've got updates with TextMesh Pro. That technology is being integrated into the UI toolkit as a way to render fonts. TextMesh Pro has been around for a while, but we'll be seeing it integrated more and more into the engine for sure. For the UI builder, we've added several usability improvements as well, such as multi-selection support and place text editing directly in the canvas. So again, a lot of time saving, making your life easier and making things quicker as you build out your projects. HDRP, always a big one. We got a whole bunch of new things coming in here. For me, there's a lot of the path tracing fog and subsurface scattering, all these things. When you actually see them, when I just have them here as a list, they're not that exciting, but when you actually see them in place, they're great. And we will share a link here just at the end of this section as well. If you're interested in any of these topics and you want to learn more instead of just reading them really quickly or hearing me talk about them quickly, we actually released a webinar a few months ago that you'll be able to watch them and actually see some of these things, because you can do really amazing visual things with HDRP, and just talking about them, I don't think does it justice. We'll see if Bronson can come up here in a few minutes and do them justice and bring them to light. We also have some updates for 2D. We don't want to leave out all the 2D creators as well. We streamlined 2D menus, improved the default assets, so it's not just the white square anymore. There's other things that let you build out your games and flesh out things a lot quicker. More passes available. You can make prettier things. And 2D animation with 2D IK included is really cool. For 2D animators out there, using the bone structures and things like that in 2D, really speeds up workflow, makes your life easier, and we've got a lot more improvements there as well. But also for platform and services, it's not just all in-engine things, it's also about how you distribute games and where you distribute them to. So we've added native Apple Silicon support, adaptive performance 2.0. This includes a bunch of sample projects in there, so you can see things like variable refresh rate, scalars, adaptive performance simulators, They've all come now in Unity 2020 LTS, as well as some updates to the input system. Again, as a Switch developer, as a console developer for years, input systems was always really a pain and a hassle. The more we can bring of the new input system, the better. I've been using it, really enjoying it. I can pretty much pick up any controller from the new next-gen consoles back to some pretty old school stuff, and it all just works. It's like magic. So definitely check out the input system if you haven't started using it already. Over here on the services side, using the Unity distribution portal, you can distribute your game to multiple asset stores, through the single Unity hub. And in Unity 2020, we've made a few changes to it here. So the Unity distribution portal is now decoupled with the Unity in-app purchases. This means you can use UDP packages, whether or not the in-app purchases is implemented on it, where before it had to be. We also enabled you to go to the Unity distribution portal through the service window now. So you can simply one click, add it there. No more digging through menus to find it. And we've made a few changes to the UDP console to enable project level permissions that now require the UDP package to handle the new permission system. So if you're using any of this, a few updates to the services as well as the editor itself. So I'll put these here in the chat in just a minute, because that was a lot of context really quick. We get that, but we do want to dive a little bit deeper into some of these features here. So we'll put these here. If you do want to check out that very similar list of those features and actually see them being used, see screen examples of all those fancy HDRP updates, we'll give you that link there. Of course, the LTS release notes is a great spot to see if you want to read all the latest updates, see what's happening, bug fixes, optimizations rather, all those things there as well. And then the Unity release overview we'll give you in just a second. If you're still kind of undecided if I should use the text stream versus the LTS release, that's a great website or web page to go to that'll kind of help you distinguish the two and maybe give you a better idea of which one you want to go to. So before we go into the next thing with Bronson here, are you ready to go, Bronson?
Absolutely.
All right, I'll put these links here in the chat, and I'll let you take the screen share and get going.
Just a sec. All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to be covering URP, actually, and shader graph. So some of the new things that we have in URP are here on this site, which I'm going to link to in the chat. I can't find the chat. We'll do it later. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to cover is URP now has screen space ambient occlusion, SSAO. Yay. So what does that mean? I guess to know what SSAO is, first we have to understand what ambient occlusion is, right? So ambient occlusion, it's basically a graphics technique that's used to sort of like darken the creases and where things come together in your world. So what it does is it actually helps ground objects more in your world and also give things a little bit more shape and definition. So I'm going to show you the kind of extreme example, which is here we have no SSAO on the left, SSAO on the right. And you can see how, very extreme example because nothing's colored, but you can see how, it helps bring definition to all the buildings and makes all the objects kind of feel more grounded as if they're actually part of the world. So here I have the Viking village example. And this is a version of the scene that has no baked lighting. And that's important to note because when you bake lighting, you can also bake ambient occlusion into the scene. So the distinction here is screen space ambient occlusion versus ambient occlusion in general. Ambient occlusion can be baked into specific objects. It can be baked into your scene as a whole. It's all, determined beforehand. Whereas screen space, we can do it live at runtime. So if I were to turn on the screen space ambient occlusion, normally in built-in renderer, let's say, it would be in the post-processing effects. But with URP, it's actually part of the rendering asset. So here, actually it is on already. So here you can see, for example, when I turn on the screen space, the SSAO, you can see how kind of the creases between the logs, or even like over here, things get a little bit more shadow, and it helps ground things. And also for me, like one of the best uses of SSAO is it helps your dynamic objects feel more grounded in the same world. So because nothing here is static in this version of the scene and nothing is baked, there's no shadow where these two objects come together, right? But by adding SSAO, you add a little bit more like dynamics, I guess, and like that grounding that makes it feel like, oh, these objects are actually close to each other because they have shadow now. Oh yeah, and I guess, you know, you can crank up the intensity and the radius to get real crazy, make some really undesirable effects. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe you're making some kind of weird horror thing and that can work out for you. Yeah, so that's the first feature. That's SSAO. We got it finally. I'm just gonna pop over into this other version of the scene. I should probably set those settings back, eh? Let's put it there. That looks good. Cool. So now the next feature that I want to show off in URP is they've added clear coat to the standard shader. So what clear coat is, basically in real life, when you paint a car or other vehicles, I guess, there's three coats. There's your primer, there's your base color, and then you add a clear coat on top of that. And that's what gives it that sort of very noticeable, like car-like sheen on top of your car. So now they've added that sort of extra complex lighting to the URP standard shader. And to see that, I'm going to go over to, there were some boats from the future that have escaped from the future into this Viking village. And yeah, and they are clearly missing their clear coat right now. Maybe something about passing through time, you know, it took it off. So we're going to re-add the clear coat on this boat. So here's the, whoops. Here's the new URP standard shader. So there's multiple lit shaders. The clear coat is available in the complex lit version. Whoops. So now if I enable the clear coat, you can see how the boat kind of gets like an extra sheen to it, as if it was a vehicle, I guess, a car, something like that. And you can kind of mask it and play with the smoothness a little bit. And yeah, that's all there really is to know about clear coat, as far as I know. So now we're gonna move on to, let me check my notes. Yeah, so they've also added detail maps and detail normal maps to the same shader. So over here on this same boat that's passed through time, I've added sort of this this rusty detail map, and I turned it down to 0 so we won't see it, but you can see as I turn it up, it adds a rustiness to the boat. So the idea here is that a detail map allows you to add a little bit more fine details to your objects, and you can also add the detail normal map to help give normals to those fine details, so that the way that the light reacts with the surfaces makes sense with the details that you're adding. I think you can see it in some of these as well. Come on now. Which object am I on? Well, maybe not. Anyway, so ideally, if I could select the right object here, these sort of scratches and other little details that you see on the, is it this one? Anyway, the little scratches and things, you could add those as details that get added on as a detail map. And then you could add the normal detail map on top of it so that the light actually reacts to the fact that there's a scratch there. And actually another really nice use of detail maps is to help sort of bring multiple objects together. So maybe if you want, how would I put it? For example, if you had like a large gash that went across multiple planks in your scene, but those planks were actually modeled as separate reusable modular objects. So that gash isn't baked into the planks at the modeling process, because you're going to want to reuse it in all kinds of different ways. You can add that detail map to help bring details that actually go across multiple objects. And again, make them feel like they're more sort of grounded in the world and they're actually connected in some way. Yeah, now another thing that's been added to URP is we have shadow mask support. And in order to show that off, I'm going to open up my little, where is it? My little Contanisio box here. This is the famous Contanisio box created by Ciro Contanisio to show shadows. Okay, so basically there are 3 different types of indirect lighting modes that are available in the light mapper. There's the baked indirect, subtractive, and now shadow mask has been added. You may be familiar with shadow mask. It was in the built-in render. Now it's been added to URP. I'm going to try to quickly go through the differences between all of them. So subtractive mode is the cheapest mode. It's what you're probably going to use if you're working on mobile or any kind of lower power devices, or just trying to target like a larger amount of devices. And the way that subtractive mode works is basically our real-time objects, our dynamic objects. So this sphere is not static, it's dynamic. When it casts a shadow, it lerps that shadow color to the one that's set here. So what you end up having to do, it kind of basically, it takes that shadow, it stamps it onto your static objects, and it goes to the color that you set in your settings. So you end up kind of with a bit of weirdness here, trying to, match the colors together and make it work. You'll also see if I move the light around, the dynamic shadows move, but everything that was baked, I baked this real quick before, is completely static. If we move to the baked indirect mode, do a quick bake. Now, if I kind of move the light around, you can see that we have a little bit of wiggle room here. And that's because basically, like if we move too far away, essentially, you can see where the light was in the indirect lighting that was baked into the object. So you can't push it too far necessarily, but we do have some amount of sort of real-time shadow support, even with our static baked objects. And we can also move this sphere around, and we no longer have to guess the color. I think that's right? Yeah. So that's kind of the baked indirect mode. So the lighting on the static objects is fed by the sort of indirect lighting from the bake. And then we also have a little bit of real-time support for moving lights around and moving our real-time objects and things like that. Feel free to jump in if I'm forgetting anything, Ciro.
No, you're saying everything correct.
Okay, great. And then finally, the new shadow mask mode. Let's bake that real quick.
I was thinking of asking the chat, what do they actually use in their productions? If they use any of these mixed modes, because each one of these mixed modes has its own use, right? Its own use case. So I'm curious to hear if people are using them already. the reason why we're explaining is because sometimes they're a bit obscure, right? Each one has its own advantages and disadvantages.
That's actually, it's a good point that I forgot to mention, that these are specifically mixed lighting modes also. So my directional light is actually set to mixed. It's not real time or baked.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, let's see if they say what they use. But yeah, I'll show off this, like the shadow mask support. So the shadow mask, it's the most expensive one. And it kind of gives you, it's sort of the best of all worlds in a way, but it really also still depends on your use case, I guess. So one of the advantages, for example, of shadow mask, we still get this sort of like real-time shadow that works well. We can still kind of like play with our directional, what have I done? Play with our directional light a little bit. And that all works. And you can still see, you know, there's still some indirect light that's baked into our static object here. You can kind of see this like weird opening where the door was, where the light was initially pointing. But we also have, as we move away from the object, it actually switches from the sort of half real time or the real time lighting into the fully baked lighting. So what shadow mask can be really good for, you can see here actually, yeah. So you no longer see that kind of like window of light moving around. Now it's fully just the baked light. So what shadow mask is good for is if you have a very, very large environment, for example, where things in the far off distance are going to be harder to notice when they switch from this real time to this baked mode. That's a great use of shadow mask. And you can see that fade, right? So that's actually another one of the new features in the thing, is that the shadow mask fade, no longer a nice, no longer a rough hard cut, but like a nice fade between the two. So there's some tweaking to be done there if you want to make that look as good as possible. And if you want to tweak those different parts, you can also, yeah, see it fade from piece to piece here. So at these separate distances, you're going to lose a little bit of quality further and further and further back until you get to the fully baked version that's there. I feel like I've rambled a bit. Chiro, get me on track here. What am I what am I doing?
Well, I mean, you talked about everything there was. I think you need to mention the cascade, the
cascades, eh? Yeah. So another change now is the shadow cascades. They used to only work in percentages, which is okay, but it's not obvious. So, for example, you know, saying shadow cascade 1, so that's your highest quality shadow here, is going to be 12.9% of the distance from 0 to, this is your max distance. So 50 somethings. We kind of know it's meters, but 50 somethings. And then your sort of second quality is going to be, 15.5% of, you know, the full thing. And it starts at 12.9%, blah, blah, blah. It's not that useful. It's not hard or not easy to understand what's going on there. So now there's a new working unit where you can work in metrics. So basically your highest quality shadows are going to be from 0 to 6.4 meters away from the object. So that's in Unity, a meter is a unit. So 6.4 units. And then as you move past then, you get to this sort of like 7.7 and blah, 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 until you get as far back as, you know, number 4. And then finally, when you hit 50 units away, then it's going to go to the baked lighting. You can play with these.
Somebody's asking in the Q&A, cascade shadows are kind of an LOD for shadows.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say even cascade plus the shadow mask distance support kind of is like the full gamut of LOD for shadows. You know?
Yeah, so there's sort of like a meat map. So you're playing with resolution. You have a certain resolution which you define in the asset, which is here on screen. You see the shadow resolution at the top, to 2048. Oh, yeah. And then you distribute that resolution across these cascades. So you have a percentage of that used for closer objects, a percentage of that used for like meet ground, and a percentage of that used for faraway objects. And what Bronson just showed is that now you can choose that in metric units, so it's easier to understand for a user. And then again, with the shadow mask support, which is one of the most expensive mixed modes, but it's the one that gives you the most benefits, you can then transition directly into baked shadow maps. So it gives you the best of both worlds.
Yeah. No more questions. Okay, I have one more thing to cover, which is the new shader graph improvements. And to do that, we're going to jump into this other scene. Can't see my play button. Well, there we go. No. Okay, so we have this cool vertex displacement shader running here. And the shader graph for that is here. And yeah, one of the biggest improvements is now instead of having everything in sort of the master node, we have what they're calling the master stack. So the master stack, it breaks your outputs into two different boxes, into different nodes, you could say. You got your vertex stuff up here on the top. We can bring these together. And your fragment on the bottom. And one of the, first of all, one of the cool things about this is it's easier to sort of separate and be more clear about like, okay, these are the things I'm doing a vertex. These are the things that are affecting the fragment. So also if people don't know, the fragment it's like the pixels, right? So that's like the operations you're running on every single pixel of your object versus the thing you're running on every single vertex of your object. And then some of the other cool improvements is, for example, I'm not using the tangent. Why don't I just get rid of it? I'm not changing the normal. Why don't I just get rid of it? If I decided later, I was like, oh, actually, you know, I did want to do that. You can go here, either hit space or right click, create node, and you can sort of add bits back in. You can reorder them. So just like some nice UX improvements there. Here, same with the fragment. You know, if you're not using metallic and you're not using smoothness, get them out of here. Who needs them? And then you can also add, there's all kinds of new, I think they're new. I haven't seen them before, but new things like you can have your 3 different normal spaces here. Maybe. Okay, just one at a time. Or, you know, you have the coat stuff now because we have clear coat available in URP. So yeah, so the master stack adds some nice sort of UX improvements for working with what used to be the master node. So your outputs. The next thing is there used to be kind of a way to manipulate the nodes here with like a little gear, but now we have the graph inspector. And the graph inspector lets you inspect both the sort of global graph settings and whichever node you have selected, the sort of individual node settings. None of these are great. Nothing particularly fancy in any of these nodes, obviously, but if you had a custom function, actually there's a custom function node, right? Yeah. Here you can see, oh, if you're dealing with a custom function node, then you have a lot more settings to play with specific to that node. And all your graph settings are all in one place. If you want, you know, you can very quickly switch between like, I want an opaque workflow. Actually, no, I wanted a transparent workflow. Things like that. It's all up there now. Oh, and of course, we've got, let me get this blackboard out of here, the addition of the elbow node, which seems innocent, right? Now, oh, I can make my curve kind of go like this or go like that. Maybe I even get crazy and have 2 elbows for some reason. But it also has one really, really nice use that I think is huge, which is the ability here to, let's say, pipe one thing and then split that out into 3 different ones. And that's super nice because if, for example, you wanted to all of a sudden try like, what would it look like in view space? You kind of just have to make one little change there. That's what it looks like. Not much. And then, that'll easily pipe into all the different places that was hooked up. And that makes experimentation with different nodes really, really simple and easy. I think that's it. If what else is there? Oh, sorry. One last thing that I wanted to show too. We now have this increased indirect bounce limit in the light mapper. Maybe I should have gone over this before. Sorry about this. But basically, this is really nice if you're working in very complex indoor environments. You can crank up the number of bounces. So the way I guess that light mappers work is, it tries to, in a way, sort of emulate real life where light hits objects and then bounces off those objects and hits that object and sort of keeps going until those light rays run out of energy and then they sort of pitter off and die. So that's what the bounces are. So now in the previous version of URP, there was a hard limit of, I believe it was 10 bounces before, something like that. And now you can go as high as 100 bounces. So that can really help sort of improve your indirect lighting. Like you can see here, especially in this corner where it's like, it's kind of around the corner. So you're not going to get a lot of indirect lighting there with one bounce. But once you have 100, it helps sort of brighten that up a bit. Caveat is more bounces means your bakes are going to take a lot longer. So the sort of like the nice side, the upside is really, it's all like, there's no extra cost after the baking, right? So if you want to sort of work through your scenes at one bounce and, quickly iterating, trying new stuff, when you're happy, crank that up to 100, make your final bake. There's no runtime cost. You're going to have the best possible lighting at that point. So yeah, that's just a nice improvement that now you can really push those much, much further. And I believe that's all I have to cover today. So
I wanted to make one quick note, Bronson, because I think it can be interesting to some. If you switch back to the Viking view, I mean, you don't even need to do that, but if you go to the asset where you tweak the SSAO, right?
Right. I see what you mean. This here.
The renderer. Yeah. So you will notice now that the SSAO actually relies on this, it says source, depth, normals. So the SSAO is relying on this texture, which uses the depth and the normals of the geometry in the scene, which was also available before, but you had to do like a little bit of a hack to get it. Now, due to a reorganization of the code, you can actually access this texture yourself and use it for various effects. So there's an API which is highlighted in the changelog in the URP, which allows you to access this texture. And for instance, we use it on a project to create a classic outline effect, right? So you create an outline around objects by detecting the change in the depth and the normals. And that's when you decide that there's an outline there. So now I'm just saying that like this texture is much more easy to grab and use in URP. So it can be used to create interesting effects exactly like the SSAO does.
Cool.
That's my contribution.
Thanks, Chiro. So I guess with that, I'm going to throw it over to Dan with programming.
All right.
tools.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Bronson. I'm always excited about new things for URP. Been using it in a lot of my projects. So yeah, especially the screen space ambient occlusion. So hello, my name's Dan Miller. I'm going to be covering the kind of programming tools. Got a lot to go over here. So let's dive right in. So the first thing I want to do is start off with C#8 syntax. Now, a couple caveats. One, like everything in programming, there's multiple ways to do it. So I'm going to be showing some specific examples for a sample project that I put together. These are no way, the best in every case, but it is kind of a way to think about some of this new syntax. And really what the syntax does is allow you to structure your data, structure your code in kind of more streamlined or concise ways. So if you're not familiar, C#8 is available. And in Unity, we have several features available. There are a few that are not available. So I just want to call those out, the ones that are not available. And then I'm going to show some use cases and examples for some of them that are. So there's about, I think, 16 or 17 new features. So 4 of them are not available yet, and this is in the LTS. So that is the default interface methods, indices and ranges, asynchronous streams, and asynchronous disposable. So with those out of the way, let's hop into some of them that are supported. So the first one is going to be switch expressions. So if you're familiar with switch statements, the classic kind of, you have the cases and then you break and you can kind of fall through things like that. Switch expressions are a little bit more kind of concise. There's less keywords. A couple things to note is that you cannot necessarily use a switch expression for everything that you might be using a switch statement for. And that's because there's no support for things like fall through. And the other thing I want to note here, and this was kind of just a new thing for me, is underscore is going to be the default case. So we'll kind of see what this looks like. And also you'll see that this kind of switch expression or these additional kind of expression patterns are going to be used a couple times here. So what does this look like in code land? So here on the left, we have a switch statement. In this particular one, I'm going to show a sample project about making juice. So keep that in mind as we go through these. So this one is actually returning a color value. So here we have a method here, get juice color switch. It's taking in a juice type enum, and then it's basically declaring a return value as the white color, going through the switch and setting that return value based on all these different juice cases. So we have apple juice and we have apple juice color, peach juice, etc. Now on the right, we have this switch expression. So this is the new syntax that's available. So similarly, we declare the method here, color, we're getting the juice color, and we're passing in that juice type enum. Now, notice we have this kind of equals greater than, or the kind of expression or lambda syntax there. And then it's actually the reverse of what you see in the switch statement. So we have the actual kind of what we're switching on here, which happens to be that juice. Then we type switch. Then we have curly braces with a ending semicolon. And then what you see here is each of the kind of cases are just simply typed out. We have that expression again. And then each line kind of ends with a comma. So this is really helpful for just kind of associating one piece of data with another piece of data. In this case, we're associating a juice type enum with a color value. And you'll see how this kind of plays into the sample project a little bit later. So that is switch expressions, again, available in C#8 and available in the LTS. Next is tuple patterns. So if you're not familiar, tuple was introduced in C#7. This is just a way to associate kind of multiple values or data with a single kind of object or a tuple here. So very similar to switch expressions, tuple patterns allow you to basically evaluate multiple pieces of data. So here we have another method here. This is how we're making the juice. In my example, we have apples, oranges, and peaches, and those combine to make juices. So you can see here with the kind of syntax here, it's passing in a fruit type. So we have 2 of those. So we have the first fruit and the second fruit. Similar syntax there with the expression, the 2 parameters, and then the switch. And then we're going right into this method here. Now you can see that we are evaluating both of these things. So we have apple and apple equals apple juice. Apple peach equals apple peach juice. And then, I've left out some of it, but we go through and that's how kind of all the juices are created. Next is nullable reference types. So this is what Microsoft calls one of the most impactful features available in C#8. And really it's looking at kind of changing your program or your coding flow around nulls. And so, everyone in Unity that's done some programming is used to the dreaded null reference exception. And so this is kind of a way to start kind of guarding against that and catching some of these potential null references exceptions early. So what this does is this kind of splits your reference types, so string, object, etc., into nullables and non-nullables. So non-nullables, you can see just a normal string. nullable reference types have that question mark. So that's kind of basically denoting that this is now a nullable reference type. And so that's what we kind of have there. Now, it is an optional feature right now, so you do have to enable it. So you can do that basically pound nullable enable. Commonly, that's up by the using statements or the namespaces. And what this does is this lets the compiler warn you about some potential null values. So basically, when you get a null reference exception, you're trying to do something on an object that you've then dereferenced. I highly recommend checking out this blog. This is by one of the C# language designers on Microsoft, really talking about how this feature is working, what they're thinking about in the future, and things like that. So what does this look like in practice? So here we have a nullable game object. Then we actually have a public getter. Now, if I didn't make this public getter nullable, so if I didn't put the question mark there, Unity is going to warn me and say, hey, you're potentially getting something that could be null, give you a little warning there. And then on my on trigger here, I'm actually trying to get the rigid body component on this game object. And what you'll notice here is I'm actually checking if it's null and then trying to do something with it. Now, since I've made these nullable, you can actually see that the console here gives me a warning. It says, hey, you're possibly going to be hitting a null reference exception here, possible dereference. And so the way that this works is that the logic can actually tell, it can go into if statements, it can kind of modify your flow and warn you if there's going to be a potential null reference exception. In this specific case, we can just basically assign that game object there, and then we're going to grab the component, the warning goes away, and we're all good. The next thing I want to mention, and this is kind of the last one, and then I'll hop into a small demo project, is the null coalescing assignment. So this is the question mark equals operator. And basically what it's saying is it's saying, hey, if I'm null, assign something to me. So here's a kind of interesting example here. We have again, similarly, a transform here that's of type nullable, a nullable transform, and then we have a public getter to it as well. Now, in the update, you can see basically I'm declaring object to rotate. If it's null, so object to rotate question mark equals, then I'm setting it to my own transform. So I'm saying, hey, if I'm null, set it as my own transform before I start doing this rotate on it. Now, because we have a public getter, this could be set through another script. So you could kind of link into this, say, hey, use this transform there. And then in the update, if it's null, then that object to rotate question mark equals is just not gonna be assigned to that new value or to the default transform itself there. So again, these are just kind of four kind of examples here that's available within the C#8. So now I want to hop into the project here. And again, this is kind of a demo. I'm actually using this as a little bit of a playground to test out some of these new features. So here we have the ability to just grab fruit. We can put the fruit in the tray, hit the button, and then we are making juice. So that was some apple juice. Here's some orange juice. I don't think I've ever had peach juice, but apparently that's what it looks like. And so, yeah, just to kind of walk through a little bit about how this is set up. So here in the scene, so we have these two, what we're calling fruit spots. So they have these kind of fruit sockets on them. And then we have the button here. So this button has the kind of button manager, which I can hop into right here. So what happens in the button manager is we're basically just doing an assert to make sure that we have this juice creation manager. And then we're calling try create juice. Now, if this is true, then we're going to go ahead and animate that button, which then kind of controls how the button actually animates down. And in this try create juice method is where we're actually kind of animating the juice. So how does that work? Let me just show this right here. So basically, we are just kind of animating the juice up like this when we're creating it. And here on the game manager, we have this kind of juice creation manager. We have a little mouse input for controlling the juice, clicking the buttons, and things like that. So if we go back into our code here, and I go to this try create juice, what we're doing here is we're just checking if the kind of current fruit here is null, either in the first or second socket. If it is, it says, hey, we can't create juice here. So let's go ahead and, return false and just send a debug log. Now, if we can, then we're going to go ahead and make this juice. And so here's where we're grabbing that tuple pattern. So if I go down here, you can see we're taking that fruit type for the first and second, and then we're switching it here. Now, one thing to note is you might notice we have, apple equals apple juice, apple peach equals apple peach juice. Now, if you go down to the peach, you can see peach apple equals peach apple juice. Now, again, there's no fall through with switch expressions. So if I wanted these to be the same values, of course, I could kind of assign them to be the same enum here. In this case, I'm just kind of saying, hey, the leading fruit is the, let's say, dominant flavor in the juice there. So once we do that, then we go to fill juice. So fill juice is basically going to grab a color. So this is where we're passing in the color for the current juice that we just set. And similarly there, here's that switch expression. And you can see we're just associating this kind of juice type directly with a color. So if we look back here in the editor, here's some nice kind of pink, oranges, and yellows that we've assigned for these different juice colors. And that's how that's kind of all linked up there. So really, this was just kind of a sample project that I put together to start to play around, make a little demo scene for testing out some of these new C# syntaxes, and also just kind of exploring some of the different use cases within a real project and within Unity. Now, this is publicly available. It's on my kind of personal GitHub here. So you can go to danmillerdev/juicemaker. It's going to be a work in progress as some of these additional features come online. I had some ideas to kind of play around with using the indices and ranges, but that's not yet available within Unity, but potentially, coming in some later versions there. So just, again, kind of a small use case, trying to look at some of these new syntaxes and some of the new patterns and how those can relate back within Unity and within some kind of real scenarios or real projects. All right, so now I want to hop in quickly to profiling tools. So Profiler, if you're not familiar, just a way to kind of get a deep understanding of what's happening in your project, understanding performance, different graphical considerations, really understanding, how to optimize your project, what might be going wrong, what might be going well, etc. So one of the new features we've added is the standalone profiler. So if we go back into Unity here, window analysis, typically we've had this profiler here forever. That's going to open it directly here in the Unity editor. We also now have the profiler as a standalone process. It's going to say, hey, this is kind of an additional process that Unity is launching. Are you okay with that? We can go ahead and hit OK, and that's going to open this up here as kind of another application. So what this allows us to do is, if you're familiar and you used the profiler before, you know that if it's in the editor, it's consuming some of its resources itself. So it's kind of going in there. We can pause it here. It's going to pause the application in the background, and then we can start looking at kind of what's happening within our project. Now, this is a fairly simple project, so you're not getting too much data, or there's not much overhead there. But really having this as a kind of standalone process lets us evaluate it a little bit more and get more insight to what's happening. When it's running directly in the editor, you're not getting as accurate information about things like performance or FPS because it is taking up some of its own resources there. So that's a big improvement there. We've also added a lot of additional APIs, so you can get different kind of performance data. So there is a profiler recorder API. So here's kind of the documentation link here. And what that looks like is really just allows you to create these profile recorder objects. You can then start them. Here we're doing that on the on enable, and you have all the different profiler categories that are available in the profiler, and then you pass in these stat names. So this allows you to basically just get information that normally is reserved only for the profiler and expose it at runtime. So this can be a great tool for understanding things like the minimum spec of what your application could be. And you can see there, here in the update, we're just kind of showing that there as text value and then converting the what we call last value there from bytes to megabytes. So I mentioned these kind of stat names. So those are kind of specific strings. This is just half of them. The documentation page obviously has all of them there. And you just pass these in to get the data that you're looking for. And then you can kind of display it however you want. All right, so we have 1 minute left. I'm going to walk through safe mode. So I'm going to do a quick stop share and reshare quickly here with optimize for video clip. And let's pull up these videos. So here is safe mode. If you're not familiar, it basically allows you to open Unity and it says, hey, we've encountered some errors. Do you want me to go into safe mode? So here I am loading up a Unity project. And what's going to happen here is we're saying, hey, there were some compilation errors. Do you want to enter safe mode? I say yes. And that's going to give me kind of a slimmed down version of Unity. Here you can see we actually have some compiler errors. I fell asleep when I was coding this or something. So I'm just going to complete this instantiate syntax here, follow that out, save it, and then go back to Unity. Unity is going to recompile, say, hey, everything is fine. And then it's going to exit out of save mode and then go back into normal Unity. And here we can kind of continue working. So really, this is a way to kind of get you out of potentially a bad situation where, you know, maybe there was some merge conflicts, something happened, and really it's just kind of a safe environment to resolve any issues that you might see. So similarly here, this is one I've kind of run into a bit, is some package cache errors. So this is when you have some conflicting code in your packages. Maybe things aren't in sync. In this case, I have kind of a lower version of the AR core package, which is kind of reliant on AR Foundation. So I can go ahead and update that. Again, the package manager is available in safe mode. There is some kind of limited capabilities, but this is one that is available. So you can kind of resolve that and get out of the kind of error state and then go back. It's going to recompile there. And now we're back in normal Unity. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Ben there. And I think we have a little over time, but hopefully a lot of the questions and things have gotten answered. So yeah, thank you so much for coming.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Dan. I know as soon as you mentioned the infamous null reference exception, when I used to teach, 9 times out of 10, the first error anyone would get in Unity is a null reference exception. So anything we can do to help minimize those, I definitely look forward to. Same with this, spending so much time, updating a version of Unity, finding a compile error after it's spent the time to build the libraries and all that. So much time saved. So thank you so much for showing that. And we are a little bit over time here. Let me take the screen share again from you. We are just a minute or two over time here. It looks like our questions as of right now are answered there. But if anyone does have any last minute questions they'd like to ask, again, please use the Q&A section of Zoom, just so all of us here, the panelists and experts, will see them. We can stick around for a minute or two to help answer those. Of course, what we covered today was just a very small smattering of the features that are available in the 2020 LTS. We started off with those big walls of text of all those updates we have. We've got plenty of them for you to come all over. So I will throw these links again in the chat for everyone who is interested. You can go to these sites and check them out. Watch the Unity 2020.2 beta webinar, which actually has a lot of these features in that to get more in-depth detail on it. Of course, check the LTS release notes as well. And then the Unity overview. And speaking of that, as a reminder, we started off talking about LTS and the tech stream. If you want to learn more about the tech stream, you can come on back on Thursday. We have another webinar, same time. You do need to sign up. It is a different link. We'll put that here in the chat as well. Putting them all right now. So you have both the information and, of course, the link to the newest webinar as well. So please come back on Thursday if you want to learn more about Unity 2021.1, the tech stream. We'll be covering that side of things instead of the LTS. And we'll stick around here for just a few minutes to help answer any questions as well. And for any of our R&D and other experts that are here as well, if there's any questions or anything you want to add, please feel free to jump on camera or mic, and you can also go that way.
Classic awkward moments of silence, right?
It goes right at the end, just waiting for stuff to come in, waiting for people to answer stuff. Yeah.
We have some stuff in the Q&A.
Okay, let's see what we got here.
Do we have Andrew Parsons still on the call? Andrew, can you
Hello.
Hey, did you see the question in the Q&A?
Let me bring it up. What I'll do, so the question is about ECS, which is Entity Component System, and which is part of DOTS. The DOTS stack, some of those components, such as jobs and the C# and brain fade. There are some components that are actually already released in the core, right? So in 2020 LTS, you'll find things like jobs there. But ECS, we're just taking some more time to actually work on that. So if you go to our forums, and I can dig up a link and put it somewhere, Chiro, there's actually an update on what's happening just in this current release, where we're recommending that if you are working with ECS, to just be considerate about the fact that the next ECS release is not in the 2020 LTS 2021 tech stream. We're just spending some more time on that. I also refer you back to our GDC keynote, where we just talk a little bit about why we're spending some more time on that. But basically it comes down to there is a lot of stuff that's going in at entities, and we want to make sure that it meets the quality bar that we have been working so hard for all of Unity's editor stuff and technology. So we want to make sure it's hitting that bar, and there's a lot of work there. So, and I also want to say there's a lot of people working on it. That team is a sizable team that are working on it full time. So I can't give you any more update than that, Sing. I apologize. But as I said, I'll dig up the link really quick for the forum post.
Thanks, Andrew. But yeah, basically the message is that we haven't abandoned it at all, right? Like it's actually more alive than ever, but we're just taking the time to really make it solid. Do you still hear me?
Yep, we hear you here. Yeah, we're just reading through these questions. I see there's another question.
Sorry,
here.
yep.
Oh.
No,
I
was just going to say, if I'm just going to put a link in the chat for the main DOTS forums, because not only is there an update on that in terms of the current releases, but there's also a couple other things in there. There's a DOTS best practices learn course that you can actually go into, get some insight into how to approach DOTS, and also a professional services sort of case study look back of how DOTS was sort of implemented in a particular project. So rather than give you a specific forum post, I'm giving you a link to the actual forum itself.
Cool. There's another question from Elena Ocone in the Q&A. The question is about accessibility. I wonder if you're referring to, because in the chat we discussed UI Builder, so I don't know if you mean that or general Unity accessibility. Again, I will just answer live the question in the chat before the feature to switch between light and dark UI in the UI Builder. I think it's not there yet, but it's it's planned. Otherwise, I mean, you can always use styling if you're building something yourself, like either a tool with UI Builder or in the future some runtime UI. You can always use styling sheets to provide accessibility, you know, in terms of like text size or contrast, color contrast, and stuff like that. But again, the automatic switch between dark and bright UI for tools is kind of like on our end, and it's being made. Okay, cool. Yeah, referring to UI Builder, yes. I hope it answered the question. Cool.
There was a question there related to improvements on the kind of markers and things like that for the GPU profiler. I don't know if there's been specific improvements related to that. I will say things have been expanded. I want to say, you know, markers are, you know, more accessible now with things through scripts, where before it was kind of laying some of the foundation there. I want to say it's been kind of more stable and things like that, but I'm not 100% sure. As far as the GPU profiler, there, you know, in general, we've just kind of ramped up the profiler team a bit, tried to make it a little bit more robust, and try to make it more accessible for kind of everyone in various different situations when profiling their application.
Yeah, and with the opening of the profiling API, even if there's something that you can't get like directly from there, you have access to all that information to create custom tools as well. So we're not exactly sure what exactly you're trying to do with that information or what you are having to dig into. But if you do look into that new profiler API and the expanded capability of that, they're very well may, that's what I'm trying to say, get it out there, be an option to create your own tool or to create like your own custom view for that will get you that information quicker.
And just to follow up on that, there was an anonymous question that came in here around 2020 with debugging Android applications. So there was some issues on kind of lower end Android applications with the profiler. So you can now basically debug those a little bit better. Obviously, make sure you're in kind of development mode, but you can directly connect to that as a built application. So there was some improvements happening there in the LTS and just with the general kind of profiler updates.
I also want to add that we actually have a package which is called Android Logcat. So if you know the Logcat tool, which is an Android native tool to receive like, what do you call it? Like the
log messages.
Yeah, log messages. Yeah, sorry, thanks. From the system, right? You can actually install that package and receive them through Unity. I think that's how it works. Anyway, I'll leave the link of the package in the chat so that you can explore its functionality. 1, 2, 3, Logcat 1.2.
We had another question here about UI Builder. They asked, do you have any plans to be compliant to regular HTML, CSS files? I don't know that one for sure. Do any of our experts work on that one? Any of us heard that?
No, I don't know.
We may have to reach out to see there. I don't think we have that direct information right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the question is about the compliance, right? Like the making it compatible with, I guess, screen readers and things like that. I'm not sure, but I think we have it in our radar because there is somebody at Unity working on the accessibility of the games made with Unity, right? Which is an interesting and important thing for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely something I like to help champion. I've talked. I know accessibility has been a hot topic for a long time, and at least we have people looking at it now, which makes me very happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're doing some efforts on the editor side, right? We have the UI scaling at this point in the editor, which at least helps with like font size and 4K monitors and stuff like that. And but we need to work also on the game side, right? The runtime. But I think they have it on their radar. But anyway, we will bring the question to them. Sorry if we don't have it right now, Anthony.
And I see one last question here. I see a new package of WebRTC. Is this something that will be pushed to 2020 LTS? So as per kind of like the LTS, how the release cycle works, if it's a new feature or something new, it won't be added to the LTS. If there is anything new, not just WebRTC, but anything in general, those kind of updates, new features, new anything like that gets pushed to the text stream. So 2021.1. I don't know in particular if that will be coming to the text stream, but generally speaking, if you are looking for kind of bleeding edge, you see something cool that Unity may support, if you're going to find it anywhere, it's going to be the text stream. So if it is something that was just released, it won't be coming or won't be added to the LTS again.
I do see it. Yeah, I do see it here. I see it on GitHub in the Unity Dash Technologies. It looks like it's compatible with 2019.4 and 2020.3. So the LTS is there, but it is still, it went from a preview state. It's now, there's an experimental state. So sometimes packages have compatibility, but it's not going to kind of be bundled in or anything like that, as well as what we call verified package. So there's a little bit of caveat at use at your own risk, but it looks like it does list compatibility with the 2020 LTS.
There we go. Maybe you'll get that after all then. All right, looks like that's the end of our question log for right now. We are 15 minutes or so over time, so I think it's a good spot for us to wrap up. So on behalf of all the panelists, Unity, all the R&D experts, everyone else, thank you so much for tuning in today. Hopefully you're able to take something good away from this. Again, if you are interested in learning more about the tech stream, come back on Thursday. That link is there in the chat as well as on screen now. Same time, same hour slot on Thursday. We'll be talking about this. I'll be here as well as some of our panelists right now and some new ones as well. So we hope to see you then. Any last minutes from anyone that may want to add anything?
Just thank everyone for joining, all the attendees. It's always nice to be able to connect.
Absolutely.
And thanks to the people from R&D who joined us with covering the questions as well.
It's always good to get stuff directly from the folks working on stuff. So, all right, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there then. I hope you all have a good day, good evening, good morning, wherever you're joining in from. And again, come back Thursday to learn more about the tech stream. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.